Hello everyone. So now I'm going to be presenting my second analogy in my self-analysis assignment. First of all, I wanted to give myself the analogy of being a Sharpie, a black Sharpie, something that you would use to write with. And within that, I see the Sharpie is black, and usually when you're using a Sharpie, it's very bold and the stuff that you write tends to be very important. And so within that, I like to see myself as a bold person. Bold meaning that I like to step out in front and I like to take charge. And within that, I feel like there's also a few self-reflections that I was able to see as a good example of that. Secondly, when you're using a Sharpie, it's usually over top of other writing, and it's to show that you're on top of things and what needs to be done. And within the Sharpie, I see that myself as the person who's usually on top of things and likes to get things done. Because Sharpies are usually one of the last things that you do in showing that you're getting things done, because it's very bold, and which is another trait that I had said, and allows you to get things done faster because you know exactly what you need to do. And then thirdly, I like to think of a Sharpie as an example of being strong-minded, because it's showing that you've got an idea that you want to express it. And so with being strong-minded, I feel like that's another great example of who I am, because I feel that I personally am very strong-minded when it comes to speaking, acting, and engaging. So first of all, I wanted to start off with chapter 1, the very first self-reflection, talking about understanding the leader in you. And so within the self-reflection, we discussed was 10 different leaders, and all of them, whether they could be, maybe some people say good or bad, but I wanted to go on to the part where I decided that looking at some of these leaders, they were very, very bold when it came to making their decisions. And so I wanted to show that this, in fact, was very close in representing of what I like to do. So, for example, in part C, which was discussing about how the leader inspired you or gave you some encouragement, I wanted to start off with saying Martin Luther King Jr. had inspired me to voice what I may only seem as a dream and a fantasy, and to make it a reality. I feel like this was a very, very bold move and allowed him to become the great leader that we all know today, voicing what he imagined and then being bold about that. I feel like that's also a very strong-minded thing too, because you must have the very strong words of encouragement, and in order to do that, you need to be strong-minded and bold in that sense. Secondly, Barack Obama. It was very bold of him to attempt to become a president and successfully become a president for 2 terms, as he was one person that wanted to bring about change. And to be bold and open and strong-minded about that, you had to be on top of things too in order to engage and become the president of the United States. With Barack Obama, he was just a very strong person in general, and with that, I feel like that's also another trait of the Sharpie that then can relate back to me. And so within my self-reflection, there was a third person, actually was Fidel Castro. Even though some people may not see him as a goody two-shoes of a person, I see him as still a fantastic leader. And he reminded me of myself as being a Sharpie, because he inspired me to strive through speed bumps and crises in order to help lead those who need it. And in order to get through crises and speed bumps that he encountered in his own ways of leading, I feel like that's a great example to show how strong-minded he is. And doing that self-analysis, it reminded me of how I, as a person, am very strong-minded when it comes to striving to get through issues and crises that I encounter, whether it be through some groups that I'm in, whether it be through classes or tests that I have to overcome in order to achieve what I want. But I feel like that was a good example of being a strong-minded person, which then relates me to the Sharpie as my analogy. And then finally, another thing on there was strengths. I wrote down that my strengths were willing to stand up for what is right, strong-minded, which was one of my key parts of my analogy of being a Sharpie, confident, and an open-minded and a good team worker. And so with being confident, that also goes to show as bold, because you're not afraid to voice what you believe in, and most people see as someone voicing their own opinions as a bold move, and also can be very useful when it comes to leading. When you stand up for what's right, that also can be bold, because sometimes it may not be the majority of what people want or the majority of what people believe in, but it is the right thing to what you want to do, and it's a very bold move. And within that, I feel like that's a great way to show how myself as a Sharpie, which is very bold and is usually very strong-minded when it comes to engaging and acting. So secondly, I wanted to move over to chapter 3, which was understanding the leader-follower relationship. So within this, there were a few questions that I believed were very good and allowed me to connect myself with being a Sharpie. The first question was number 3, which asked, are you highly committed to and energized by your work to organization, giving them the best ideas and performance? This was talking about what style follower am I. I gave myself a 6 on a scale from 0 to 6, which was showing how I'm highly committed, which means that I was on top of things, a very key trait of being a Sharpie, as I referred to myself as. And within that, giving them the best ideas and performance. As being a follower compared to a leader, you want to always be putting your best foot forward. And so with that, you would need to be strong-minded and on top of things. With being on top of things and strong-minded with that, you're able to engage actively, you're able to voice your opinions, and to give exactly what you need to those people. Within that, there's a very good relationship to being a Sharpie, because with the Sharpie, you're using that to put across a point. With a point, it's usually you need to be bold about it and make sure that you're on top of things in order to engage and show that it really means something to you. And then another question I wanted to go back to on chapter 3 was do you take the initiative to seek out and successfully complete assignments that go above and beyond your job? With that, I see myself very, very keen on, as I rated myself a 6 on the 0 to 6 scale. And with that, I see a very bold move, because that's taking the initiative. But you can also state that it's very on top of things, as you realize there's a task that needs to be accomplished. And I feel that being bold and very on top of things allows you to accomplish that task, and that is also why I see myself as a Sharpie. Taking the initiative to successfully complete assignments, an assignment is something that needs to be done, and it has a specific due date. If you're on top of things, you need to attack that situation and finish it as soon as possible. And I feel like myself as a leader is very effective in that sense. And then thirdly, for chapter 3, I wanted to go to question number 10, which was, when you are not a leader of a group project, do you still contribute at a high level, often doing more than your share? I rated myself as a 6 out of 0 to 6, even though some people may say, well, that's not very good because doing more than your share. Well, I see that as a separate ways. I feel like with people not doing their entire share, then you have to leave it up to someone else to finish it up for you, because you're either too lazy or you don't really care about their project. And so with being on top of things and strong-minded when it comes to being a Sharpie, I feel like doing more than my share, I would probably be doing that first. I'd be engaging into the project first, and I would actively try and finish as much as possible, so it would leave the rest of the groupmates to realize, oh, I didn't want this person to do as much of this work as they did, and so as a result, I'm going to step in and do a lot more of high quality work. And I feel like sometimes that can be inspiring too, which is another great point to have. Because also I can now see that being a Sharpie, if you're inspiring, you are also allowed to inspire others, and so I feel like that's another good trait of myself, and so I can relate to the Sharpie as well. Next, I wanted to go to chapter 11, which in fact was all about promoting collaborative problem solving. Before I talk about the self-reflection, I wanted to give a great statement that I found that actively shows that I'm a Sharpie, as from the book. On page 207, the subheading, Members Perform Roles. The statement was, the sentence that I liked was, although the role classification model created by Kenneth Benton and Paul Sheets dates back half a century, it is still commonly used to measure team member performance today. The following are among the task-oriented role members perform to realize team goals. And with just that part, not getting to the actual task-oriented roles that members perform, I wanted to say that the task-oriented part, that's very on top of things and very much like a Sharpie, in which I see myself. I'm always on top of things, and I'm very oriented when it comes to completing the task. And so with the role that I picked, that I see myself as a very highly person, is initiating. The member defines a problem, suggests methods, and starts the group moving along new paths or in different directions by offering a plan. I see myself very much in the sense, because that's very much what a bold and on top of things leader would do. And so I feel like that's a great example of what I am and how I can also engage myself as a Sharpie. And with being that Sharpie, being bold and initiating, those are two things that go well together, because you need to be bold in order to initiate the ideas that you have. And so I feel like that's another great trait of how I see myself as a Sharpie. Now getting to my self-reflection, which was chapter 11, as I had said earlier, there were a few questions that I believe were a very great reflection of who I am as a Sharpie and as part of a leader. So under the subcategory beliefs about my role, there was the question, I prefer to initiate ideas or actions. Out of 5, I gave myself a 4. Even though you may not see that as a very high number, I believe that that doesn't really indicate what I actually do as a leader. And with initiating ideas, as I had said, with the the role initiating, or the oriented quote that I pulled from the book, I believe that that's also very good when it comes to being bold and on top of things. Initiating ideas means that you're on top of things and you want to complete the group project as soon as possible. The next thing that I wanted to go is I encourage team members supporting their efforts. I feel like that's very, very on top of things, because you want your group to finish and engage in the project as soon as possible and as much as possible. And so with that, I believe that that's a very good trait of being the Sharpie, and that's who I am. So with Sharpie, it's very, very supportive. With when you're writing, you can say, well, I agree with your statement. You can circle and say this is a very good point. That's being very supportive, and it's being bold too. And that's just who a Sharpie is, or what a Sharpie is, and that's also how I see myself as. The next question was in the subheading, beliefs about the leader's role. Members, well, it's beliefs about who the leader is and what the leader does. And so when I did this, I assessed myself in that sense to saying, okay, well, this is how I believe that a leader should act and how they should also engage. So with the first question, which was number 2, it said leaders track team performance. You've got to be very on top of things as a leader in order to make sure that your group is actively engaging and actively completing the task. And so with being able to track performance, you need to be very bold as to ask, well, how are you doing this? Is everything working out well? Because you want to make sure that your group is doing the right thing, but also completing the task that is at hand. And then finally, question 6 in the same subheading is leader set and clarify the team's goals. That is very on top of things move, as you need to do this in order to get your group moving and in order to engage them in all the tasks that you need to complete. And with that, I then wanted to move on to the 3 things that you need to become a leader. But since I'm doing this one per video, I wanted to go and state the one very important thing to becoming a leader while being a Sharpie. With being the Sharpie, you need to be very, very on top of things. In order to be on top of things, that also will bring in other different characteristics and show you how whether you can be bold or you can be very strong-minded. I feel like being on top of things that allows the two to engage together, and that's why I chose being on top of things is what you need to be in order to become a true leader. Being on top of things allows you to accomplish your tasks that you need, it allows you to engage, and allows you to actively either seek help, help others to achieve goals that are set by parameters within the workplace, and even speak up or against what you feel might be right versus wrong. And with that, I believe the Sharpie is also a great way of describing myself as a person and a leader. This is the conclusion of my second analogy, and I will see you in third. Thank you.